Several words come to mind when you think of Ambessa Medarda. Strong, ruthless, fearsome, cunning, a dominating war queen, and an adept manipulator all rolled into one. She is an intelligent, experienced veteran in the political field and a powerhouse in battle, a fox and a wolf. And after her introduction late into Season 1, she stepped into narrative prominence to fill the power vacuum left by tragedy and confusion so deftly that it's kind of incredible. Manipulating Sallow, seating herself as the devilish mother figure and puppet master of Caitlyn's corruption arc, and ultimately colluding with Singed and eventually Victor and his army of invincible, divine zombies. She is a villain, a huntress, a conqueror, and all of these descriptors naturally bring feelings of strength to mind. And that's appropriate because Ambessa is very strong. But what's key is that the nature of that strength is rooted in fear and pain, and beneath her confident exterior lies a scared woman defined by love and a pain of loss, leading to a cyclical, spiraling fear that only ever exacerbates and eats her alive from the inside out. As we can see through the subtextual details throughout the story and the Blood, Sweat, and Tears music video, Ambessa learned through cutthroat experience that she had to discard her softer, warmer self in order to be strong and survive politically and in combat in this brutal world, and to protect those that she cared about. But we see very clearly that much like Powder was never completely gone from within Jinx, that sentimental self within Ambessa was given a silver lining and a lifeline through family. And as such, that sentimental self was never discarded completely. In fact, it was core to her power, with the strength of her oppressive rule being correlational to the strength of her love.
I can't believe you'd start a war just to cover your ass.
I would set the world ablaze to protect our family.
However, naturally, a life so full of conflict would inevitably bring about immense tragedy in spite of such a strong desire and fortitude for protecting that which Ambessa valued. And so, she experienced loss. She undoubtedly lost many friends and family close to her, with Kino representing the most pivotal one, but with incidents before and after having immense impact as well, such as Rictus, whose death she feels extremely strongly. Ambessa loves and feels the loss of that love with agony in every fiber of her being, and so she grew a philosophy of using the fear that rules over her and dictates her actions as her methodology of avoiding or circumventing it. If I use the fear that rules me to safeguard those whose mortality is the source of that fear, I can protect. Through a fierce strength of body, will, and mind to cut down all before me. Ambessa became ruthless, cold, and cutthroat, and would do anything to protect her family and build her strength and might. She attempted to freeze her heart to do so, and she embedded and immersed herself in all manner of warfare and immorality to achieve this heartfelt goal. But this plan was far from foolproof, and it had a huge blind spot.
We've lost so many. The anger, the sorrow. It's tiring. Gods, I know it's tiring. But you will never rest knowing that she's out there.
If Ambessa was able to protect her family from everything through this method no matter what, all would be perfect. But this is unsustainable. To constantly rule through fear in a compensatory way, to use that which torments her to prop herself up against others, it is very human. But to constantly amass more and more power against more and more fearsome foes, to dominate in the way she does as a conqueror, in this setting, no amount of that will ever lead to a long enough period of prosperity for her and her family. If she keeps escalating and fighting, she will ultimately, inevitably just find herself creating more and more enemies. Ambessa's goal is to protect, and yet, her method of protecting only leads to more opposing forces to target her family. It's contradictory, and that is the fatal flaw of her plan. And I don't know if Ambessa realized this and simply kept going in futility because it was the only world she knew, or if she wasn't aware. But either way, deep down she knew that she could only ever act in this way and choose this path because she lacked the strength to tread the most difficult one.
Or maybe I underestimated you. Maybe you have the strength I do not. To forgive and trust in tomorrow.
Ambessa sees that her inability to see hope in the world, her inability to ponder forgiveness cuts her off from the potentially best answer, the solution that would keep her family safest. But she cannot bring herself to do it, likely because of the effect her upbringing had on her, how being molded in blood caused her to think in this cynical way. For how can one be capable of genuine hope in this world when one has seen what Ambessa has seen? If we view it from this lens, in a way Ambessa is quite hard on herself in speaking of herself as one lacking in strength for not believing, for not seeing the world in this way. Who's to say that you or I would be any different? She only knows one thing, and that is what she sticks to. Emboldened by conflict, emboldened by love, self-aware of her tunnel vision.
I stopped being part of this family the moment you cast me out. Why? Why did you do it?
Because you weakened me. I couldn't endure the look in your eyes whenever I made the decisions, the necessary decisions to keep us safe.
Ambessa's greatest weakness and greatest strength is family, and during the time span of Arcane, this double-edged sword is personified by Mel. Not only because she's the only family she has here, but because she also foils Ambessa and lays all of her vulnerabilities bare through contrast. Mel has all of the hope and idealism that Ambessa does not, and as a result, Mel disagrees with her. And Ambessa loves Mel, and Mel has the potential to melt her frozen heart, but Ambessa cannot do that, otherwise it would undercut her strength and commitment to her rule and put her family at risk. So she sends Mel away to Piltover for that reason, to avoid the reproachful looks of judgment that threatened to undo Ambessa's entire being. But an interesting twist to this dynamic is that I actually feel like Ambessa could also harbor a slight hint of resentment and jealousy towards Mel, for so obviously having the specific strength that she describes to Caitlyn that she does not have herself. I think that in her most vulnerable internal moments, it is very possible that Ambessa questioned the ludicrousness of her daughter possessing the one trait that she was completely bereft of. Either way, Ambessa's weakness and Achilles' heel is the very thing that she sacrifices everything to protect: her family. This is expressed in multiple ways throughout the story, and it's clear as day, and this is the core of the reason as to why an intelligent, seasoned veteran like Ambessa was blindsided relatively easily by Caitlyn's turnaround in Season 2, Episode 6. With Mel missing and her only source of family gone, Ambessa took the opportunity to fill the Cassandra-shaped hole in Caitlyn's grieving heart in a sense. And this was of course done to further her influence and strength, but I also think that she used Caitlyn just a little bit like a Mel replacement, a daughter figure that could never emulate Mel or Ambessa's feelings towards her in any way, but whose presence helped Ambessa to stifle the pain and fear. And one of the most defining things about Ambessa is that she will do almost anything to avoid fear and pain. So Ambessa poured herself into Caitlyn to an extent, trusting and immersing herself in this daughter figure such that she was blindsided by what was in my opinion a pretty uncomplicated and simple betrayal that wouldn't have fooled her if she wasn't blinded by emotions and struggles. Additionally, I find that Ambessa draws a really interesting parallel with Silko in terms of similarities in how they approach their own respective conquests. In explaining to Mel about how simply defeating Black Rose isn't enough, Ambessa describes their psychological situation as a torrid, horrific one.
This is more than vengeance, child. These mages dangle over our heads a sword that impales us should we rise too high. Their very nature violates the most core of Noxian principles, that every one of us is equal on the battlefield. That through cunning, sweat, and skill, we shape our destinies.
She talks about how her enemies threaten the very function by which their worldview is based on, that which states that all who are able to meritocratically win in warfare are able to transcend any societal hierarchies. In other words, this is her path to freedom, through sheer conviction. And that is very similar to what Silko says to Deckard when talking about what those who are crushed underfoot must do to amass power.
You see, power Real power doesn't come to those who are born strongest, or fastest, or smartest. No, it comes to those who will do anything to achieve it.
It's interesting that such a similarity can be drawn between those on either side of the Piltover divide, but in both cases the two claw themselves up through using whatever means they can to get that power. Because that is what the world demands if equality is desired, and that notion is palpable on every step of the rung, top to bottom. We even see it for characters like Sallow, constantly fighting and struggling to not be at anyone's disadvantage for the sake of self-preservation. And although in a lot of cases those on top have much less grounds to feel this way than the likes of Silko, Savika, Vander, Vi, or anyone in the Undercity, it nonetheless contextualizes why Ambessa has stuck herself in this cycle of diminishing returns and futility. And she tops it all off with the sentiment that grief for the fallen is best repaid through pushing even stronger onwards.
We do not lament a warrior's death. We avenge it.
And so we see that due to all of this, her need to restore all, her need to protect her love, her need to honor those perishing under her rule with more violence and continue to fight more to protect that which she puts in danger, the way violence represents the path to salvation and the faintest glimmer of an ever-fading happiness, Ambessa has a need for warfare and continuous conquest that is incredibly fervent. So due to this, bloodshed and rule have become as natural a part of her life as breathing is. So much so that it causes her to hurt those that she loves, the original reason for her actions in the first place, as a result of becoming so lost within her methodology that she conflates violence with love in an undercutting and contradictory way.
So you let him die?
I carried him in my belly, nursed him from my bosom. He was all the sweetness in my heart.
This all makes Ambessa a deeply lamentable, tragic character. By all accounts, she was never someone who was born like this, but she had to mold herself to fit the world that she lived in order to survive and protect that which made life worth living. But she was never able to properly kill off that little girl inside her, and it instead became the catalyst that urged on her actions. Yet, bound by the chains of a dysfunctional motherhood, on the quest to protecting her love, she lost herself and ultimately became hooked on war and violence like a drug, as the only means through which she could feel free and powerful in a world that deprives her of those feelings. Like the addicts in the Undercity who are hooked on Shimmer. This path of hers only puts that which she protects in grave danger, but she cannot bring herself to stop, and it's exhausting. Agonizing. To me, Ambessa was absolutely a victim, and remains one. That doesn't mean that she isn't a horrible person who is capable of all the evil in the world, but it does shift the emotional complexion of her journey and role in the story, and it does make her hit harder for me than she would have otherwise. Many would do the same as her when faced with doom and the only means of preventing the loss of their family. It set her on an unsustainable war path that would only ever undercut the cause that she fought for in the first place, putting at risk the family that she wants to protect as a result of the rule that she established to protect them in the first place. It's a paradox, a spiral that cannot be broken except in one manner, that which Ambessa is not capable of: hope. She couldn't hope. She established fascist regimes. She gave in to godlike, inhuman armies and enacted all manner of cruelty to hold on to that which she valued most: family. But without a firm grasp of the spirit of what she was fighting for in the first place, she lost herself and her violence became her way of life. And the daughter that she swore to protect ended up having to stop her in the most definitive way. And yet, in spite of all this failure and futility, there is a semblance of light here, as Ambessa, in her last moments, was able to pass her torch on to Mel, hoping that her daughter would be able to find the answer that she could not. In a way, I think, proud of her legacy and deep down, thankful for a rest and reprieve from her endless torment. Many thanks for watching.